The sound was a wet, sickening thud. It was the sound of a steel-toed boot connecting with the ribs of a dog. The German shepherd, Max, let out a pained yelp before his body went limp on the manicured lawn. The boy, Trent Sterling, stood over him, his face a mask of smug fury. His target, a teenage girl named Sarah, was already on the ground, clutching her arm, tears streaming down her face through the dirt and grass stains. A small crowd of teenagers watched from the sidewalk. Some held up phones, their screens glowing in the fading afternoon light. They recorded. They did nothing else. This was the scene that greeted John Carver as he turned the corner. He was just passing through, a ghost in a town he had no connection to, save for a single, solemn promise. He carried the weight of that promise in the worn leather leash coiled in his hand and in the heavy urn that sat on the passenger seat of his truck. He was here to deliver a dog and the ashes of a hero to that hero's daughter. He was here to find Sarah. It seemed he had. John's world, which for years had been a muted gray of memory and discipline, suddenly snapped into sharp, brutal color. The boy's sneer, the girl's silent terror, the loyal dog's broken body. He saw it all, and something deep inside him, a thing he thought had been buried in the sands of Afghanistan, shifted. It awoke. He stopped his truck in the middle of the street. He did not turn off the engine. He opened the door and stepped out. His movements economical, fluid, and utterly silent. He was not a large man, but he moved with a density that displaced the air around him, a quiet gravity that drew eyes. The teenagers on the sidewalk lowered their phones. The boy, Trent, turned, his arrogance faltering for a fraction of a second as he took in the man approaching. John wore jeans and a plain gray t-shirt. His hair was cut short, military style. There was a tattoo of a coiled serpent and a trident partially visible on his forearm, but it was his eyes that held the attention. They were flat, calm, and as cold as a deep-water trench. They saw everything and revealed nothing. He did not look at the boy. Not yet. His gaze went to the girl on the ground, then to the dog. He saw the shallow, pained breaths. He saw the loyalty in the animal's eyes, still fixed on the girl he had tried to protect. John knew that look. He had seen it in the eyes of men. He had seen it in the eyes of his friend, Michael, Sarah's father, the man whose dog now lay dying on a stranger's lawn. John's focus shifted to Trent. He stopped a few feet away. He spoke, and his voice was not loud, but it cut through the suburban quiet like a razor. Let go of her. Trent, emboldened by his audience, puffed out his chest. And who are you? Her daddy? John did not answer the question. He simply repeated the command, his tone unchanged. Let go. There was a stillness in him, a complete absence of fear or agitation that was more menacing than any shout could ever be. Trent felt it. A primal instinct flickered in his gut, a warning from a predator to a lesser creature. He ignored it. He was Trent Sterling. His father owned this town. Make me, Trent sneered, taking a step toward John. John's movement was almost too fast to see. He did not throw a punch. He did not engage in a fight. He simply moved forward, one hand coming up to grip the base of Trent's throat, his thumb pressing into the soft tissue just below the jaw. It was not a choke. It was a point of control, precise. Professional. Trent's eyes widened in shock and pain. His breath hitched. All the bravado drained from his face, replaced by a dawning, pathetic fear. John leaned in, his voice a low whisper that only Trent could hear. You have 3 seconds to get your hands off her and walk away before I forget that you're a child. He released his grip. Trent stumbled back, gasping, clutching his throat. He shot a hateful glare at John, then at Sarah, before turning and stalking away, his friends trailing behind him like pilot fish. The silence that followed was heavy. John knelt, first beside the dog. He ran his hands gently over Max's ribs, his fingers assessing the damage with practiced skill. Broken, but not displaced. Lungs seemed clear. The dog would live. Max whimpered, but then seemed to recognize something in the man's touch. A familiarity, a scent of his old master. He licked John's hand weakly. Then John turned to the girl, Sarah. She was staring at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice was softer now. She shook her head, though she was clearly favoring her arm. He just pushed me. He was angry about... It doesn't matter." "It matters," John said. He stood and offered her a hand. She hesitated for a moment before taking it. He helped her to her feet. "I'm John Carver. I served with your father." Recognition dawned in her eyes, followed by a fresh wave of grief. You're the one he wrote about." "I am," John said. "I came to bring you Max. And this." He nodded toward his truck. He hadn't planned for it to be like this. He had pictured a quiet meeting, a solemn handover. Not this violence, not this ugliness. He carefully lifted Max, cradling the 70-pound dog as if he were a child. "We need to get him to a vet. Then we need to go to the police." Sarah looked down the street where Trent had disappeared. "The police won't do anything. His father is Richard Sterling." She said the name as if it were an explanation for everything. In this town, it was. John looked at her, at the resignation in her young face. He had seen that look before, too. In villagers in far-off lands, oppressed by men who believed they were kings. It was a look that settled his soul into a cold, hard place. He adjusted his grip on the wounded dog. "I promise you," he said, his voice low and certain, "this ends today." That promise hung in the air between them. It was not a comfort. It was a statement of fact, a declaration of intent. It was the beginning of a war that Richard Sterling had no idea was coming. The veterinarian's office was small and smelled of antiseptic. Dr. Evans, a woman with kind eyes and capable hands, confirmed John's field diagnosis. 2 broken ribs, severe bruising. Max was sedated, bandaged, and resting in a kennel. He would recover. John paid the bill in cash. He and Sarah sat in the waiting room. The urn containing her father's ashes was now in a backpack at his feet. The moment for that transfer still didn't feel right. "Now the police," John said. Sarah just nodded, her face pale. She had not spoken much since the incident. She just watched him, studying him with the same observant quiet her father had possessed. The police station was a modern brick building that seemed too clean for the work that was supposed to happen inside it. The officer at the desk listened with an expression of profound boredom as John laid out the facts. Assault, animal cruelty, multiple witnesses. The officer, a portly man with a name tag that read Sutton, typed slowly into his computer. He stopped when John mentioned the name Trent Sterling. Sutton leaned back in his chair. "Trent Sterling, Richard Sterling's boy." "That's the one," John said. "Look, sir," Sutton said, his tone shifting to one of weary condescension. "Kids get into scuffles. A dog gets kicked. It's not ideal, but it's hardly a major crime. I'm sure if you just talk to Mr. Sterling—" "I'm not interested in talking to him," John interrupted, his voice remaining level. "I'm interested in filing a report and pressing charges." Sutton sighed. "We'll take a report. But I'll be honest with you. Without more evidence, and with the boy claiming the dog attacked him, which he will, this isn't going anywhere. There were witnesses, John said. A dozen kids with phones. Witnesses who won't talk, Sarah mumbled from her chair. They're all afraid of him. John looked at Sutton, whose eyes refused to meet his. He saw the truth there. This wasn't about evidence. It was about power. The system here was not broken. It was owned. They left with a slip of paper, a case number that meant nothing. As they stepped out into the parking lot, a black sedan pulled up, blocking their path. The window rolled down. A man in a tailored suit, his face a smooth, unlined mask of wealth and privilege, looked out at them. Richard Sterling. He ignored Sarah completely. His eyes were fixed on John. "Mr. Carver," Sterling said, his voice smooth as polished stone. "I heard there was a misunderstanding involving my son." "There was no misunderstanding," John said. "Your son assaulted a young woman and brutalized an animal." Sterling offered a thin, dismissive smile. "Trent can be spirited. He's a boy. Boys make mistakes. I've already spoken to the veterinarian. I've taken care of the bill. Consider it an apology. Let's let this be the end of it." "It's not about the money," John said. Sterling's smile tightened. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. "Is it not? Everything is about money, Mr. Carver. I understand you're a veteran. Thank you for your service. Perhaps this can help you resettle." He held the envelope out. John looked at the envelope, then back at Sterling's face. He felt nothing. No anger, no temptation. Just a cold, clear certainty. He was dealing with a man who had only one tool, and who believed it could fix anything, buy anything, silence anyone. "You should put that away," John said softly. Sterling's eyes narrowed. "I assure you, it's a generous amount, more than enough to make you forget this unfortunate incident and be on your way." John took a step closer to the car, leaning down slightly. He looked past Sterling, at the driver, then back to the man himself. "You don't understand," John said, his voice dropping to that same dangerous whisper he had used with Trent. "You think you're threatening me with a bribe. You think you can buy your son out of this. You can't." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "Your son hurt a girl I'm sworn to protect. He hurt a dog that belonged to a better man than you will ever be. That wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. And now you have to live with the consequences of that choice." He straightened up. "So no, this isn't the end of it. This is the beginning." John turned and walked away, Sarah following close behind him. He did not look back. He could feel Richard Sterling's gaze on him, a stare that had gone from condescending to venomous. The offer had been rejected. The counter-threat had been delivered. The lines were drawn. That night, John and Sarah stayed at a small, anonymous motel on the edge of town. Max, groggy but stable, slept on a blanket at the foot of John's bed. John sat in a chair by the window, watching the parking lot. He did not sleep. He cleaned his sidearm, a pistol he was licensed to carry, its parts moving with oiled precision in his hands. He was thinking. He was planning. The next day, he took Sarah to her school to report the incident to the principal. The principal, a man named Henderson, listened with a practiced, sympathetic expression. He folded his hands on his large oak desk. The Sterling name was on a plaque on the wall, a major donor to the school's new gymnasium. "This is very serious," Henderson said, his face a study in feigned concern. "However, Without any corroborating statements from other students, it becomes a case of his word against hers. "What about the video?" Sarah asked, her voice small. "Everyone was filming it." Henderson steepled his fingers. "Ah, yes. We have a strict no phones policy during school hours. Any such video would be inadmissible. And besides, I've spoken with Trent. He's very remorseful. He claims the dog was aggressive." It was the same story as the police. A wall of complicity, built and paid for by sterling money. John stood up. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Henderson." He knew this was a dead end. He had to prove it to Sarah, to show her that he was trying the official way first, so she would understand what had to come next. The harassment began that afternoon. While they were at the grocery store, someone slashed the tires on John's truck. All four. A clean, professional job. No note. No message. Just an inconvenience meant to intimidate. John simply called a tow truck and had them replaced, paying in cash without comment. His face remained a calm, unreadable mask. That evening, a smear campaign started online. Anonymous posts appeared on the town's social media pages, accusing Sarah of being a troublemaker, of provoking Trent, of owning a vicious and untrained dog. Old photos of her were doctored and circulated, lies crafted to isolate and shame her. Sarah sat on her motel bed, scrolling through the comments, her shoulders shaking. John took the phone from her hands. "Don't read that poison." "They all believe him," she whispered. "It doesn't matter what they believe," John said. "It only matters what's true, and we know the truth." The next morning, they found a dead bird on the doormat of their motel room. Its neck had been snapped, a crude, visceral threat. Sarah flinched back from the door. John simply picked it up with a napkin and disposed of it in the trash. But inside, the cold resolve was hardening into something sharper. This was escalation. Sterling was moving from systemic pressure to direct intimidation. He was testing John's limits. He was about to discover John didn't have any. Clear's throat, John knew he could not fight a corrupt system from within. He had to build his own. He made his first call that night, from a payphone 2 towns over, using a string of calling cards. The voice that answered on the second ring was gravelly and calm. "Talk to me." "Reaper, it's me. I need eyes." There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "John Carver. Thought you'd gone to ground for good. Who are we watching?" "A man named Richard Sterling, his son, Trent. Town called Northwood." John gave him the details, all of them. "Small-time tyrant in a small pond," Reaper said. "My favorite kind. They get sloppy. I'll get you everything. Financials, communications, digital footprint. Give me 48 hours. "I need it in 24, John said. "For you?" "Done." The line went dead. His next call was to a woman named Maria Vance. She was an investigative journalist, sharp and relentless, the kind who collected powerful enemies like trophies. John had been given her number once by a man in a government office, with the instruction to use it only in case of a true injustice. This qualified. He met her in a diner halfway between Northwood and the city. She had a tired, cynical look in her eyes that vanished the moment he started talking. When he mentioned the name Sterling, she sat up straighter. "Richard Sterling," she said, a flicker of Hunter's excitement in her gaze. "I've had a file on him for years. Rumors, whispers, bribed officials, shady land deals, a few ugly incidents with his son that just disappeared. But I've never been able to get anything to stick. No one would ever go on the record." "I have a victim who will," John said. "And I have a witness, a four-legged one, Maria leaned forward. Tell me everything. He did. He laid out the assault, the police inaction, the principal's dismissal, the harassment. He told her about the promise he'd made. A man like Sterling, he's built a fortress of money and fear around himself, Maria said when he was finished. To bring him down, you can't just chip at the walls. You have to blow a hole right through them. You need more than one victim. You need a chorus. Can you find them? John asked. If they exist, I can find them, she promised. But you'll need legal cover. Sterling will throw an army of lawyers at you the second he feels truly threatened. John already had that covered. His third call was to Ben Carter, a former JAG officer who had left the service to become what he called a legal pit bull for the underdog. Carter owed John his life from a firefight in a forgotten corner of the world. He was a man who paid his debts. Ben listened to the story on a secure line without interruption. Systemic corruption backed by generational wealth, Ben said finally. Nasty stuff. They'll try to bury you in lawsuits. Defamation, harassment, you name it. They'll file restraining orders. They'll try to paint you as a disturbed veteran with a grudge. Can you handle it? John asked. Handle it? Ben laughed, a short, sharp bark. John, I will dismantle it. Pro bono. Consider it a down payment on what I owe you. Get me names. Get me evidence. I'll sharpen the knives. The team was forming. Reaper, the ghost in the machine. Maria, the voice in the light. Ben, the shield in the courts. And John, the fulcrum. While Reaper dug into the Sterling's digital lives, Maria worked her sources. She found what she was looking for in 2 days. A name. A girl named Amy. She had been the captain of the cheerleading squad 2 years ago. Trent Sterling had been the quarterback. There was an incident after a party. Amy had left school abruptly, and her family had moved away a month later. There were rumors of a settlement, a non-disclosure agreement. Maria found them living 3 states away. John decided he had to go himself. He left Sarah in a new, more secure motel, with Max standing guard at the door. The dog had a new focus, a new purpose. He rarely left Sarah's side, a silent, furry shadow of protection. John found Amy working at a coffee shop. She was pale and withdrawn, a ghost of the vibrant girl in the photos Maria had shown him. When he said the name Trent Sterling, all the color drained from her face. I can't talk about that, she said, her voice trembling. We signed papers. They'll sue us for everything. They can't sue you for telling the truth in a criminal investigation, John said calmly. And they can only hurt you if you're alone. You're not alone anymore. He told her about Sarah, about the dog, about the police. He didn't pressure her. He just laid out the facts. He told her about the team he was building. Why are you doing this? She asked, tears welling in her eyes. I made a promise, he said simply. He left her with Ben Carter's number. He didn't know if she would call. It had to be her choice. Her fight. On the drive back, Reaper called. I'm in, he said. And it's dirtier than you think. Sterling owns the police chief. Monthly payments to an offshore account. He has the mayor on a leash through a series of shell corporations that hold his campaign debt. And the son, Trent? He has a sealed juvenile record. Another assault charge. It was wiped clean by a judge who happens to play golf with his father every Thursday. Reaper continued, his voice grim. And I found something else. Sterling has private investigators watching you. Not just watching. They've been digging into your military record. They're looking for a way to discredit you. Let them look, John said. There's nothing in my record that will help them. That's not all, Reaper said. I'm tracking their comms. They're getting frustrated. Sterling is used to people folding. You're not folding. He's getting angry. Angry people get sloppy, but they also get dangerous. The warning hung in the air. John knew what it meant. The minor escalations were over. The intimidation had failed. Something worse was coming. Sterling was a cornered animal, and he was about to lash out, not with threats, but with violence. John's hand tightened on the steering wheel. Let him come, he thought. The attack came 2 nights later. It was calculated, brutal. And it was the final mistake Richard Sterling would ever make. John had moved them again, to a small rented house on the outskirts of a neighboring town, paid for in cash. He knew they were being watched. He wanted them to feel secure, to think he was settling in. He spent the day fortifying the house in small, subtle ways, jamming the windows, reinforcing the door frames, setting up makeshift perimeter alerts using fishing line and empty cans. It was second nature to him, the muscle memory of 100 hostile environments. He put Sarah and Max in the back bedroom, the one with only one small, high window. Stay here tonight, he told her. Don't open the door for anyone but me. She nodded, her eyes wide. The fear was back, a constant presence. Max sat at her feet, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He sensed it, too. But Sterling was smarter than John gave him credit for. He didn't come to the house. The next day, Sarah had a pre-scheduled appointment with her family doctor, a follow-up for a routine checkup made weeks before any of this began. John was wary. He drove her there himself, scouting the route, watching every car in the rearview mirror. The clinic was busy, public. It felt safe. That was the trap. He waited in the car while she went inside. Max sat in the passenger seat, his head on a constant swivel. Trent Sterling and 2 of his friends were waiting for her in the parking garage. They cornered her as she walked back to the car. There were no cameras in that section. It was a dead zone. This time, there was no audience, no bravado, just vicious, cowardly violence. Trent grabbed her, his face contorted with rage. You and your soldier friend think you're so tough, he spat, shoving her against a concrete pillar. My father is going to ruin him. And you're going to learn to keep your mouth shut. He hit her. A closed fist strike to the face. Her head snapped back against the concrete. Stars exploded behind her eyes. But through the pain, a flicker of defiance, born from John's promise, ignited within her. She fought back. She clawed at his face, her fingernails digging deep into his cheek, drawing blood. He grunted in pain and surprise, shoving her to the ground. His friends moved in, kicking her, their blows landing on her ribs and back. She curled into a ball, trying to protect her head. Through the haze of pain, she remembered something John had told her. If you can't win, survive. If you can't survive, make them pay for it. Evidence, Sarah. Always get evidence. She reached out, her hand closing around a fistful of Trent's jacket, ripping a button from his custom-tailored blazer as he kicked her again. She held it tight in her fist, a small, hard piece of proof. Then a final, brutal kick connected with her temple. Her world went black. John felt it before he saw it. A prickle on his skin, a sense of wrongness. She had been gone too long. He left Max in the truck and started toward the clinic. He saw them first. Trent and his friends jogging out of the parking garage, trying to look casual, but their movements were too quick, too furtive. Trent was holding a hand to his cheek, where blood was welling from 4 parallel scratches. John's blood ran cold. He broke into a run, his heart pounding a heavy, controlled rhythm against his ribs. He found her crumpled on the concrete floor of the garage, small and still. A dark pool was beginning to form under her head. For a single, silent moment, the world stopped. The sounds of the city faded away. All he could see was the broken form of the girl he had promised to protect, Michael's daughter, lying on the ground just as Max had. He knelt beside her, his training taking over. He checked her pulse. It was there, thready but present. He checked her breathing, shallow. He saw the swelling, the blood, head trauma. He didn't move her. He called for an ambulance, his voice a low, steady command into the phone. He waited with her, one hand resting gently on her shoulder, a silent promise of presence. When the paramedics arrived, he gave them a concise, accurate report of what he had found. He rode with her in the ambulance, his face an unreadable granite mask. He stood in the stark white corridor of the hospital for hours. He listened as the doctor told him the news. Severe concussion, 3 broken ribs, a hairline fracture in her jaw. She was unconscious, but she was stable. She would live. A nurse handed him a small plastic bag. It contained Sarah's personal effects. Her phone, her keys, and a single dark gray button, clutched so tightly in her hand they had to pry her fingers open to get it. John looked at the button. He recognized it. It was from the blazer Trent Sterling had been wearing. Under her fingernails, the nurse had said, they found skin and blood. John stood there, holding that small bag of evidence, and the last vestige of restraint within him crumbled to dust. The rules were gone. The by-the-book approach was over. He had tried to use their system, their laws, their procedures, and this was the result. A child lying broken in a hospital bed. He made a call. "Reaper," he said when the line connected. His voice was different now. All the warmth, all the humanity, had been stripped from it. It was the voice he used on the battlefield, the voice that gave orders that ended lives. "I heard what happened," Reaper said, his own voice grim. "I'm sorry, John." "I don't need sorry," John said. "I need everything you have, now. The plan has changed. We are no longer exposing him. We are dismantling him. His business, his political connections, his life, everything. We burn it to the ground." "I've got it all," Reaper said. "The offshore accounts, the recordings of him bribing the police chief, the deleted security footage from a loading dock camera across from the parking garage. It's grainy, but it shows 3 figures matching their description entering and leaving at the exact time of the attack. It's enough." "Send it to Maria and Ben," John ordered. "Tell them the timetable has moved up. Tonight." "What are you going to do?" Reaper asked. "I'm going to make sure he can't run." John hung up. He walked out of the hospital and into the night. He was no longer just a protector. He was an instrument of justice. Cold, precise, unstoppable. Richard Sterling was hosting a charity gala at his sprawling estate. It was an annual event, a public display of his philanthropy designed to polish his image and reinforce his power. The mayor was there, the chief of police, the town's elite, all gathered to pay homage to their king. Sterling stood on a small stage, a microphone in his hand, smiling his smooth, confident smile. He felt untouchable. The problem with the veteran and the girl had been dealt with. A hospital stay, a few broken bones, they would heal. But their spirit, he was sure, would be broken. They would finally understand the price of defiance. He had won. He was in the middle of a self-congratulatory speech about community when the large screens on either side of the stage, which had been displaying a slideshow of his charitable works, flickered and went black. A moment of confusion rippled through the crowd. Sterling tapped the microphone. A slight technical difficulty, it seems. Then the screens came to life again. But it was not the slideshow. It was grainy, time-stamped footage from a security camera. It showed the entrance to the hospital parking garage. It showed 3 young men, their faces clear in the harsh fluorescent light, entering the garage. One of them was his son, Trent. A few minutes later, it showed them running out, Trent clutching his bleeding cheek. A murmur went through the crowd. Sterling's face went rigid. "Turn that off," he hissed to a technician. But the technician was staring at his console, helpless. He had lost control of the system. Reaper was in control now. The video was replaced by a new image, a bank statement from an offshore account, showing monthly payments to a name the whole town knew, Police Chief Roberts. Then, an audio file began to play. Sterling's voice, amplified through the powerful speakers, filled the stunned silence. It was a recording of a phone call. "I don't care what it takes," his voice boomed. "Shut him down. Dig up whatever you can on this Carver guy. I want him run out of town. And the girl, make sure she gets the message. A permanent one this time." The crowd gasped. People began backing away from the stage, their faces a mixture of shock and disgust. The illusion of the benevolent patriarch was shattered in an instant, replaced by the ugly reality of a corrupt tyrant. The main doors to the ballroom swung open. Maria Vance strode in, a microphone in her hand and a camera crew behind her, broadcasting live. "Richard Sterling," she said, her voice clear and strong. "These are serious allegations. Would you care to comment on the video evidence linking your son to the brutal assault of a teenage girl, or the financial records showing your bribery of public officials?" Sterling stood frozen on the stage, his face pale, his empire crumbling around him in real time. Then, a second figure appeared in the doorway. It was Amy, the girl from the coffee shop. She walked to the center of the room, her fear replaced by a quiet, steely resolve. Ben Carter was right behind her, a grimly satisfied look on his face. "My name is Amy," she said, her voice shaking but clear. 2 years ago, Trent Sterling assaulted me. His father paid my family to be silent. I am not silent anymore." Just as the chaos reached its peak, another set of doors opened. A young woman in a wheelchair was rolled in by a nurse. It was Sarah. She was bruised, battered, but her eyes were bright with a fire that no one had ever seen in them before. John Carver stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder, his face impassive. She looked directly at Richard Sterling. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice ringing with newfound strength. "Not anymore." It was the final blow. The public humiliation was total. At that moment, a single, unassuming police officer stepped into the room. It was Officer Miller, a man John had identified weeks ago as the one honest cop in a corrupt department. He wasn't flanked by Northwood police. He was followed by 2 state troopers. He held up a warrant, secured by Ben Carter from a state judge just an hour before. "Richard Sterling," Miller said, his voice steady and official. "You are under arrest for bribery, conspiracy, and accessory to assault. You have the right to remain silent." The troopers moved past him, their hands going to Trent Sterling, who stood gaping in the crowd. "Trent Sterling, you are under arrest for assault and battery." As the Sterlings were led away in handcuffs, their faces etched with disbelief, Chief Roberts made a move for the exit. He was met by another state trooper. His face fell. It was over. All of it. The fortress had been breached, and the king was being dragged from his castle in chains. John watched it all, a silent observer to the justice he had set in motion. He felt no triumph, no joy, just a quiet, profound sense of completion, a promise kept. The trials were swift. With the digital evidence Reaper had secured, the public testimony of Amy and Sarah, and the mountain of financial documents Maria Vance published, the case was airtight. Richard Sterling was found guilty on all counts. He received a sentence of 25 years in federal prison. His son, Trent, tried as an adult due to the severity of the crimes, received 15. Police Chief Roberts, the mayor, and Principal Henderson were all convicted for their roles in the cover-up. The entire corrupt network was dismantled, root and stem. Justice was not just served, it was absolute. A few weeks after the sentencing, a man came to the small house John had rented for Sarah. He was one of Trent's friends, one of the boys who had stood by and watched the initial assault, and who had participated in the final one. He was pale and thin, and he couldn't meet John's eyes. "I came to apologize," he stammered. He had testified against the Sterlings in exchange for a lesser sentence. "I was a coward. I was afraid. It's no excuse. I wanted to say I'm sorry. To her." John just nodded. He passed the message along to Sarah. Forgiveness was her journey, not his. The town of Northwood began to heal. With the Sterling machine broken, people felt they could breathe again. The cloud of fear that had hung over the community for so long had finally lifted. John found he could breathe again, too. The ghosts of his past, the faces of the men he had lost, seemed to rest easier now. In protecting Michael's daughter, he had found a piece of the peace that had eluded him for so long. He used the money from Michael's life insurance, combined with his own savings, to start a foundation. The Michael Davis Foundation for Healing Heroes. Its mission was simple. It adopted retired military working dogs, animals like Max, who were too old or too injured for service, and trained them to be companions for veterans suffering from trauma and for children who were victims of violence. He found a new purpose, not as a warrior, but as a healer, a protector in a different kind of war. The story concluded on a warm autumn evening. John, Sarah, and Max sat on the front porch of their home. Sarah's physical wounds had healed, leaving behind scars that were fading with time. Her emotional wounds were healing too, replaced by a quiet strength and a fierce determination. She was going to study law, she had decided. She wanted to be a voice for those who had none. Max lay at their feet, his head resting on John's boot. His ribs were mended, and he was content in his new role as a guardian and a friend. He would occasionally lift his head and look at John, a look of deep, knowing loyalty in his eyes. He was a silent witness to it all, a symbol of the unwavering goodness that had anchored them through the storm. John finally gave Sarah the urn. They buried her father's ashes under a young oak tree in the backyard, a place of peace and permanence. They sat together in the quiet twilight, not speaking, simply sharing the silence. The war was over. The battle was won. John looked at Sarah, who smiled at him, a genuine, hopeful smile. He looked at Max, the loyal dog who had started it all. He felt the weight of his promise fulfilled, and in its place, a sense of belonging he never expected to find again. Here, in this quiet place, with this small, unlikely family, the dormant hero had finally come home. God does not always remove the storm, but he places strength inside ordinary people to withstand it. He calls upon the quiet, the broken, and the forgotten to become instruments of his justice. When one person chooses to stand against the darkness, they do not stand alone. They become a beacon, calling others who seek the light. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is a promise made in the face of it, a promise to protect, a promise to defend, a promise that truth will, in the end, prevail. It is a quiet warrior seeing an injustice, a young girl finding her voice, a loyal dog standing his ground. It is the proof that even in the darkest of times, there is a righteous path, and there are those who will walk it, no matter the cost.